Okie dokie. Good morning, everybody. So here we are, another round of Astro-Babble. Very exciting indeed. For those of you who are jumping on and are new to the program, Monday, Wednesday, and sometimes Fridays, we do 8 charts that have been donated by you, our lovely viewers. And I'm going to talk to you about. Good morning, Jen. Good morning, everybody who's jumping on. Everybody, we are going to go through 8 charts this morning. We are going to talk about the placements. We're going to talk about the planets. We're going to talk about what this means from an astrological perspective to analyze a natal chart. If you or if someone you know, like, and trust would enjoy being a part of the live stream, please feel free to send me or have them reach out to me via private message to include them in the live stream. All I need is their birth date, place, and exact birth time, and we will get to it. Likewise, if you're interested in working with me more one-on-one, you can always check out my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com, to purchase online classes, schedule a session, etc., etc. So let's go ahead and pop open a fizzy water, and we will get to it with our first chart of the morning. And unfortunately, I can't show you the charts because Facebook won't let me screen share and go live at the same time. But I do that one-on-one with sessions. You get to see the chart and you get a copy of your chart afterwards. But unfortunately, the tech is a little bit limited. Get on it, Facebook. Anyway, so let's talk about Tristan's chart. So Tristan was born 5:51 a.m. in New York. Let's take a peek, and we are starting off the morning brilliantly with a massive Scorpio stellium in the first house of self. So we have the ascendant in Scorpio, Mercury in Scorpio, Sun in Scorpio, with Mercury conjoined the Sun in Scorpio, Neptune in Scorpio, and Venus in Scorpio, all in the first house. That's some very heavy Scorpio energy. And when we look at the three major placements of personality in anybody's chart, we have the ascendant, we have the moon, and we have the sun, right? So although somebody could be a sun sign of one of the 12 zodiac signs, let's say Scorpio, their ascendant or their moon, two other very core personality markers in the chart, may be in different signs, which is why, from an astrological perspective, I might tell somebody to read the horoscope for another sign that is different from their sun sign, especially because the ascendant is often more powerful of a personality marker than the sun itself. But in this case, we have both the ascendant and the sun in Tristan's chart in the first house of self in Scorpio. So this makes Tristan a double Scorpio. He does have this moon in Gemini up in the 8th to give a little bit of breathing room to the Scorpio placements, but certainly not much because there's so much happening in that first house of Scorpio. Let's take a peek at some of the other placements. Yeah, that Venus in Scorpio is ruling the 7th house of relationships from the first. So Venus in this chart is in her fall. She is opposing her natal sign of Scorpio. A Venus in Scorpio is kind of that Medusa archetype, and to attach that to the first house of self, there may be some issues in relationships of being too intimidating, having that paralyzing gaze, turning old lovers to stone. Not literally, but figuratively, because Venus in Scorpio feels exiled. She feels kicked out of her own kingdom, especially because this is on the first house of self and the 7th house of relationship axis. It's the idea that who you are is very different from who you are in relationships, and that can sometimes be rather intimidating to lovers, but it can also be rather frustrating for you because every relationship feels like it's slightly compromising of the self, and also an over-identification with those relationships can make that dynamic rather muddy, especially with Neptune and Scorpio here in the first. We have multiple Scorpio themes. Scorpio is known to be deep, to be dark, to be mysterious, to be very much surrounding subjects of more occult spirituality. Occult being that literal word meaning hidden or out of view. Examining the oracular mysteries. Understanding that there's so much Scorpio energy that we must respect that Tristan, your field of influence and the pool and the sandbox that you like to play in is very much the underbelly of the world, and that's a very nuanced place, and a lot of people don't feel comfortable in that space. A lot of people are very intimidated intimidated by Scorpio, and that's something that you've decided to put into your chart in spades. And so we just need to recognize that that Scorpio dark energy, you know, not everybody's going to want to come play in the dark with you, and that's perfectly fine. But you do have this lovely Gemini moon in the 8th house, which I think is really allows you to relate with people and empathize with people, not just on a Scorpio intuitive level. Like, one of the things that I love about Scorpio is just, you know, we have the ability to pierce through other people's armor, which again adds to that intimidation aspect. But because you've put this moon in Gemini in the 8th, you know, you being very charismatic with others, you knowing how to turn on that kind of Marilyn Monroe persona and speak in a way that other people's find aesthetically pleasing. Yeah, the code switching aspect of a moon in Gemini in the 8th is very well thought out in your case. The North Node in the 9th house of spirituality and higher learning, especially because it is ruled by that moon in the 8th of death. I think that there's really, and it makes sense with all of these, why you put all these Scorpio placements in the first house. Like, you've equipped yourself astrologically to go on very deep spiritual journeys this time around. Like, your job is to discover the truth with a capital T, and to understand that you should be surrounding yourself with mentors this time around. You should be really investigating the mysteries this time around. And Scorpio is uniquely equipped with both the armor and the poison in order to paralyze enemies, to investigate the things that go bump in the night. And I think that that's where we find a lot of our powerful shamanic truths that Scorpio is able to access more so than any other sign. We do have the ruler of your chart, this Mars in Sagittarius in the 2nd house of finance, which is a great, I mean, anytime that the ruler of the chart is co-ruled by Jupiter, you know, that's going to be really, really fun. I would caution, though, because Sagittarius is a mutable sign, and because Mars is an active sign that kind of capitalizes on that mutability, you spending too much too quickly. You need to put a little bit of earthiness in place to make sure that that Mars doesn't go too off the rails on shopping sprees, because Mars is that active initiatory energy, and Sagittarius doesn't have that ability to grasp or to hoard, because it is that mutable fire that tends to burn out of control. So running a little bit too hot in the financial department is a little bit part of that journey. But I mean, you're a super hard worker. You have this lovely Jupiter in Aries. It is retrograde, but it is in mutual reception with Mars. So what you do choose to kind of stick your head down with and just do the work with, I think that's really powerful. You're just a couple degrees away from a grand trine as well between Mars, Jupiter, and the MC up in the 10th of success. I really enjoy those placements. I think that they're perfect for you. Also gives a lot of vitality to the chart, which Scorpio sometimes needs that fire to counterbalance the intensity of the water. So well balanced overall. You've also got this really strong, very strong Saturn in Aquarius in the 4th house of family. Can make family life very restrictive, can make family life very punishing, very karmic, very heavy and dense. But Aquarius is also that intellectual sign, so it wouldn't surprise me if your parental unit, the robots that Saturn in Aquarius tends to produce, the robots in the family dynamic, were able to help you download via the matrix some of this intelligence that you are working towards as you uncover and unpack this North Node in Cancer in the 9th. Yeah, I think that's where we need to stop. I could literally talk about charts all day, but I need to make sure that we get to all 8 within the hour. So thank you, Tristan, for donating your chart to science, and we will continue down our line. Good morning, everybody. Carrie Ann, Rebecca, Tristan, Albert, Jonathan, everybody coming in, Celeste. Thank you. Oh, Tristan, I'm so glad that we got a little bit of tear jerking from that chart. As a double Cancer with Scorpio rising, if you're not crying, you're not doing it right. That's my life motto. Anyway, good morning, everybody. And on Instagram as well. We're going live on 2 platforms. Let's talk about Jose. So Jose was born 6 p.m. in Perth Amboy. Let's take a peek at Jose's chart. This time we have a Gemini ascendant with Mercury and Libra in the fifth ruling the chart. I'm a fan of this, Jose. I'm a fan of this for a couple reasons. You have an Aries ascendant, and then you've put Mercury, the Lord of your ascendant, in the fifth house of creativity. The fifth house is also known to be a lucky house in general. So I really enjoy this placement for sure because Mercury is also very comfortable in an air sign such as Libra. The one thing that I think is interesting about this placement is you've also put Pluto in Libra here in the fifth house of creativity, but also children and parenting. I think that this does lend a lot of powerful creativity to the chart, especially in written mediums. I think that oh, okay. As I continue to trudge through the chart, there are just really interesting thoughts that kind of come through as I open myself up to the energetic expressions of each of the planets. Because the fifth house is also associated with children, and you have this mutual reception between your Mercury in Libra and your Venus in Virgo, in the fifth and the fourth, respectively. There's this really strong connection to family and children in your chart. You very much wanting to have children of your own, being very attached to that ideal. It does also with Venus being co-present, although Venus is technically in her detriment in Virgo. She does not like to be in Virgo, but that's also part of the family upbringing that you had. Like the family upbringing was very prudish, very restrictive, but not necessarily in like the previous chart. We had Saturn in the fourth house, like talk about restriction. But Venus and Virgo is a little bit more withholding, is a good way to say it. A little bit more, this is how you should act. Do not disobey me. And because that Mercury and that Venus are in mutual reception, there's just such a strong desire for you to have children in order to break some of that family karma. And I think that that's really nice of you to decide to do. But we also need to counterbalance that family life with your work life because you've also decided to be kind of a mover and a shaker in the workplace as well. You've put your sun in Scorpio, Uranus in Scorpio, North Node in Scorpio in the sixth house of work, being ruled by this Cancer Mars in the second house of finance, which that Cancer Mars is about to go retrograde. It's stationed in your chart, which is fascinating. Yeah, you've just really, really decided to keep a lot of your work life a secret. Again, when we think of Scorpio, Scorpio is known to trade and deal in secrets. And to put this sign in your sixth house of work, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a certain element of discretion that had to be present in the career that you choose or the careers that you've chosen. It's really interesting to look back through the life and say, well, yeah, I'm in this job that requires secrets and undercover stuff for me now, but at the same time, it's always been that way. You've always found, even when you were working at like a McDonald's or, the first typical job that you worked at, even when we start at that lower level, there were always signs and hints of like people would always come to you and ask you to hide things because of that Scorpio energy in the chart. But because this stationed Mars is making a trine to this 3-degree Uranus in Scorpio, I think that, a lot of the unpredictability that comes in work, a lot of the shock and potential trauma that comes into the workplace is also what you capitalize and make money from. Like you're a fixer. You go into these situations and you're able to use a lot of these Mars and Cancer kind of smothering, mothering instincts in order to put out a lot of these fires because you're so tapped into the underbelly of what's actually going on. And your North Node is here. Like you're here to navigate that space and to learn how to put in an honest day's work and really understand how secrets are power. Yeah. And understand power dynamics in general. But you also have all of these family things in the chart, which are not necessarily super conducive to living a life that's separate from all of this power. And I think this is where we look at Pluto being the secondary ruler of Scorpio and understanding how the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth are very much connected. And it's really about creating this work-life balance. When you've chosen this time around, Jose, to be the star in the work environment, but then also come home to a family that is also helping you work through some of the family karma as well. In terms of the seventh house with a spouse, I think that you've chosen the exact perfect person. The personality of the spouse that will help you the best is somebody who's chronically idealistic, somebody who is never ashamed to have fun, somebody who is simultaneously your best friend, and somebody who tends to pull you out of that deep, dark Scorpio place in the sixth house that work tends to get you into. Neptune and Sag co-present with the moon and Sag in the seventh house, you know, there's just such a deep emotional affection here. You've attached you've attached your relationship to somebody who's so sensitive and so kind and so spunky and energetic, and somebody who's, again, always looking on the bright side even when that's a fault. But that's exactly who you need in your life, is somebody to pull you out of those darker times that your work kind of slinks you into, underneath the surface. Yes, so as we continue to do that, let's, any other parts of the chart that we want to focus on this time around? Oh, the health aspect, yeah. So because you have the sun in the health house, as well as North Node and Uranus in the health house, all in the sign of Scorpio, we just need to be a little bit more aware of prostate issues. We need to be a little bit more aware of all things reproductive, bladder, sinus, colon, especially in your chart, because we have so much happening in the sixth house, and Uranus in the sixth house does bring unpredictable medical issues. So it wouldn't surprise me as well if, like, an appendix scare early on, that would be a good example of that Uranus in Scorpio in the sixth house of health, how that might manifest. But like, I wouldn't skip colonoscopies. I would have things regularly checked. I would make sure that you're really tending to those Scorpio body systems, you know, continuing to be sexually active, really making sure that the prostate doesn't back up. All of these things that we would look at from a Scorpio perspective in the sixth, especially with the North Node, which tends to build energy and pressure from a physical perspective. Yeah, so that's the last thing that I wanted to talk about. Yes, so I'm getting questions. I'm getting questions from people in terms of how they donate their charts. So if you would like to be a part of the live stream, what I need you to do is I need you to private message me. Do not comment, only private message me to keep your privacy first and foremost. Your birth date, your birthplace, and your exact birth time. If you do not have exact birth time, I can't work with your chart because astrology is very specific about time. But I do need those details, and I would be happy to add you to the list. I do need more names as well. So please continue to send your friends, your family, yourself my way, and we will continue to have these live streams. Now let's go on to chart number 3. Let's talk about Melissa. So Melissa was born at 12:34 a.m. in Middletown. Let's take a peek. So we have Cancer on the ascendant with a moon in Pisces in the ninth. I really love this placement. Such a glorious placement. To have the moon ruling the chart and then to have her in a water sign in the ninth house of spirituality. It's such a beautiful expression of intuition. It's such a beautiful expression of higher learning. It's such a beautiful expression of constantly striving to be better. In Melissa's chart, especially, she has the MC here. We do have some issues in the chart, but we'll talk about those in a minute. I think that Melissa's chart is just right off the bat very watery, very beautiful, but also very driven towards spiritual growth and development. Okay, so now we have to talk about the hard stuff in the chart. We technically do have a grand square in the chart where the ascendant at 8 degrees of Cancer is in a exact sign-based opposition with 8-degree Jupiter, and the nodes at 7 degrees are retrograding towards that same 8-degree making a full grand square in the chart. This gives us a little bit of an issue in the chart because we have one, a Jupiter in Capricorn in the seventh house, which means that Melissa is attracted to partners who have a large majority of kingly stature, but especially in a Capricornian way, which tends to be restrictive, which tends to be a little bit oppressive, which tends to use authority in a way that is not always healthy. But Capricorn is always doing things for what they feel is the right reason, despite, things not feeling that way at the time. And that relationship dynamic also being in square to the north and the south node, co-present with the sun at 2 degrees in Libra in the fourth, and then opposing Saturn in Aries retrograde up in the 10th. Like there's a really intense square formation in the chart, which makes relationships difficult to balance between home and success, which makes personal achievement really difficult to balance with relationships. And there's this solar Saturn opposition in between it all, which really allows the light to be dimmed because I'm not good enough tendencies. This Saturn in Aries retrograde up in the 10th normally indicates a very hard worker, somebody who's constantly, admiring others when it comes to fame and really wanting that for themselves. Unfortunately, with the Saturn opposing the sun in the fourth, there tends to be a little bit of a laziness. Libra is that sign of indecision. It's that sign of balance and justice. But when we look at Libra in a negative aspect, or we start to see how Libra can manifest poorly, it's complacency. And it's the idea of peace for peace's sake is not always right. Yeah, we're experiencing a lot of that now as the moon is shifting through Libra and making squares to the retrogrades in Capricorn. The idea of, fighting for justice and fighting for things where we have been too complacent in as a society, and just because things are normal and peaceful does not mean they are right or correct. And that's something that we're seeing a lot in Melissa's chart as well, is that sun in Libra in the fourth tends to be in its most hidden place. It hides the light from the rest of the chart, and it's opposed by Saturn, which really gives us the idea that, there is a fear when it comes to fame just as much as there is an admiration. And the chart kind of winding down and needing to simultaneously retreat in the fourth house of home and family, but there also being lots of lessons in the relationship department and the growth department that still need to happen in Melissa's chart before she's able to be quote unquote comfortable. Yeah. We do have speech impediment stuff and learning difficulties in the chart as well. We have this Mercury in Virgo, the sign of his exaltation, but Mercury is retrograde in Virgo in the third house of writing, teaching, communication. So I think this is a big thing in Melissa's life, and one of the reasons why she's always struggled with, everything that she says comes out backwards, or people just don't get her, and she's, writing things down and the misspelling is crazy, or she spell checks something 3 or 4 times, but she still gets the words mixed up and rearranged. That's something that happens when Mercury is compromised in the third house of communication. So yeah, but also this is third house of siblings, so it's not just her. It could also be, if she has brothers or sisters, the idea that, the learning and speaking and writing and teaching is a difficult topic in the chart for Melissa, and we would need to do some Mercury remediation in order to strengthen that ability to be vocal, to be heard. We do have some interesting synastry between Venus and the Sun being in mutual reception. We have the Sun in Libra, and then Venus is in Leo. So they have swapped signs effectively. And Venus is in the second house of finance, as well as we have Mars and Leo here co-present in the second house of wealth and finance. Wouldn't surprise me if there was a lot of financial donation from the family, money going to and from the family, kind of keeping money constantly turning around in the family dynamic. Like any money that is earned is immediately given back to the family cause, and things are kept kind of microcosmed in that family dynamic. It's not necessarily a wealth placement per se, but it does mean that the idea of money in the second house and the idea of family in the fourth house intimately connected. We could expand that into constantly wanting to sink money into the home, because the fourth is that place of home, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that's really the crux of it, is that major square that we would need to talk about that a little bit more one-on-one, Melissa. But that's a great example of how it looks to have a certain amount of juxtaposition in the chart, and also ways that you've strategically placed to kind of pull yourself out of that hole and learn from it and grow from it with that lovely moon in Pisces in the ninth. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm getting your messages. I am seeing them. I will respond to them as soon as I can afterwards. Thank you so much. Yes, I love you. Thank you so much for doing it. Yes, the readings are free, these little mini things. I'm just doing it to promote my consultation practice. If you would like to support this live stream, feel free to go to my website, book a consult if you're interested. I do mini readings for a half hour, hour and a half readings, as well as if you'd like to learn astrology, buy a class. You can PayPal me, Venmo me, anything. But yes, these minis are free. It's just, I like to talk about astrology, and I like to give people a snippet of kind of how we can use the planets and the stars to improve the life. And you did choose all of this. That's kind of the message. Okay, let's talk about Fern. Fern, my darling, from TikTok. Let's take a peek. So born at 1:44 p.m. in Oklahoma City. Oh, I see, honey. You weren't playing around. No, you were not. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Mm-mm. Girl, I can't even. And this is the problem that I have doing these live streams, is I want to show you the chart so bad, and I can't. So we have Gemini ascendant, but the Mercury, the ruler of the chart, is co-present with 5 planets total in the 8th house. There's a super Capricorn stellium in the 8th house of death, taxes, business, estates, other people's money. We have Uranus in Capricorn, Mercury in Capricorn, conjoined Neptune in Capricorn, Saturn in Capricorn, and Venus in Capricorn, who is retrograde, all in the 8th house. Absolutely ridiculous, my dear. You've chosen to do some amazing things in your chart. You are not playing around in the slightest. In the slightest. And you were born during a new moon. I am also a new moon baby. I feel you. So let's talk stuff. Let's talk stuff. And your new moon and your North Node and your MC are all ruled by Saturn in Capricorn in the 8th. So it's all going back to the 8th. Girl. So much here. So much to unpack. Okay, so first and foremost, we need to talk about your stubbornness. Yes, I know. And part of this is only because you're protecting yourself because you're hypersensitive, and I understand this. I understand this more than most. And I understand that another reason why you feel the need to protect yourself is because you don't always know what you're feeling at any given time. And that's okay. One of the sucky things about having a new moon in your chart is the moon is literally darkened by its position relative to the sun. Your emotional state is in some ways eclipsed. Yeah? It's hidden not just from others, but also from yourself. That's tricky, darling. That's really tricky, because one of the reasons why you hide your feelings is because they're also hidden from you. And you're like, give me a second. I need to actually find them first. I need to, and especially with the moon being in an air sign, it's not an element that does touchy-feely very well. It prefers to be excited and interested and all over the place. It doesn't like to dredge or to feel or to... It's an apathetic air sign, especially Aquarius being a fixed air sign. It's not something that comes to emotionality easily, on top of the fact that it's hidden. So apathy is something that we need to really, really work on. And paired with this Mercury ruling the chart in Capricorn conjoin Neptune, like, let me tell you this. Just because you can't feel it, or just because you have a different opinion, does not mean that the feelings don't exist. And it doesn't mean that the other person is wrong. Yeah. It also doesn't mean that you're right. Yeah. But that Mercury in Capricorn, in that dense cardinal sign ruling the chart, in the 8th house of other people's stuff, other people's opinions and money and business. You know, you have a head for business, and Capricorn loves to be in that logical space of how do we grow something steadily over time. Like the entrepreneur energy in your chart is just redunculous, especially with this Pluto and Scorpio in the 6th house of work. Like, girl, you've decided to be a powerful machine, but you are still a machine. Yeah. And that comes with advantages and disadvantages. And one of those things is, you know, we can't let your robotic side drive the wheel all of the time, especially because you've decided this time around to have relationships that are going to be not just emotionally beneficial for you, but also financially beneficial for you. Yeah. You've put the ruler of your relationship house as Jupiter in Cancer in the 2nd house of finance. You've exalted your Jupiter, the luckiest planet in your chart, and attached it to your relationship. You know, the financial resources that your relationship will grant you will be astronomical. Yeah. Lovely. I love to see that. But you're also going to be quite the moneymaker yourself, and you're going to have a lot of invention and a lot of productivity in your chart. And I think that that's fabulous. But we need to make sure that you don't tin man out and you don't start rusting all over the place because you know, it rains. Yeah, we need to acknowledge some of these emotional tendencies in the chart when you've done so much to hide them. And I think that that's probably the biggest sticking point is you know how to do the logical stuff that a lot of people have intense trouble with. You know how to navigate those waters. It's very easy for you to turn off the human side of you and to just get straight down to business. And I respect that for sure. However, you are still human. And especially when it comes to your relationship, your major relationships and even family stuff, like we need to respond with somewhat of a heart. Like we need you to go through a little bit of a Wizard of Oz journey and get that heart pinned on you a little bit because you've done so much to isolate that side of yourself. And as you grow into your power with this Pluto and Scorpio in the 6th house of health, pets, and work, I think that you're going to realize that business doesn't work unless the heart is in it. Yeah. So let's stick you in a kiddie pool. Let's splash around in the heart just a little bit and get you to examine some of the touchy-feelies in terms of just working through your own karma. And you have so many skills that you've placed in the 8th house, like everything else will come naturally. I don't think that you need help in any other area besides touching that raw, vulnerable place that you've decided to hide so well in the chart. Okay. So that's Fern. Let's continue to run through these charts. Let's talk about Lise. Lise was born 9:55 p.m. in Trondheim. Trondheim? Yes, that. Oh, darling. I love your chart. Well, everybody loves your chart. Everybody loves you. You have this Libra ascendant, darling. It's fabulous. So Libra on the ascendant just sugarcoats the personality. It just makes you sweet on the outside. However, you are also very sweet on the inside because you've got the ruler of your chart, this Venus, in Pisces, her exalted sign, in the 6th house of work. Now, this immediately, if you have not discovered this about yourself, let me lay something on you, girlfriend. So, you need to be in fashion. You need to be in design. You need to be in the arts. You need to, like, there is such a visually and aesthetically pleasing side to your nature that must be vocalized. It must be. It is not a question. You are the Devil Wears Prada. Like, that is your life, or at least it should be. And I'm not talking about when Anne Hathaway runs away from it all at the end. I'm talking about you being Miss Miranda. Like, you are here to be an icon of fashion. And I think that you would actually be very, very good at it. not just because you're good at it naturally, but because you have the placements in your chart for it. You also have the moon at 16 degrees, making a sextile to the MC in Cancer, co-ruling that with the moon in Taurus being ruled by Venus in Pisces in the 8th of entrepreneurship. Girl, you need to be studying fashion. The world needs your precision. It needs your eye, your vision. The moon in Taurus is in the sign of her exaltation, and you also have the North Node here in the 8th house. Like you would just do so well in business for yourself in a fashion line or makeup or anything relating to wrapping yourself up in the visually pleasing aesthetic that is related to Venus and Libra and Taurus and Pisces. I'm just so pleased for you. I can't wait to see where you take all of this. But let's see, what other things do we need to talk about in the chart? Because that's really, I mean, that's the big thing. You put so many planets in exaltation. It's absolutely ridiculous. You know, and one of the things that I'm sure that you're aware of is that money is a little bit of an issue for you. We have the South Node as well as Pluto in Scorpio retrograde in the 2nd house of finance. But you have the North Node co-present with the moon in Taurus in the 8th. Remember that business is not always about your money. It's about other people's money. If you have the vision, if you have the idea, if you have the eye, other people will invest in you. Those people who do not have talent. Those people who have the money and want to plant it somewhere that it will flourish. You can turn that money into amazing things, but it does not need to be your own. Yes? Okay. Let's see what else. Yeah, I mean, you'd be an excellent writer, teacher, speaker as well. You have so many creative placements. It's ridiculous. I'm jealous. Mutual reception between Saturn and Sag and Jupiter in Aquarius. In the 3rd and the 5th of writing, teaching, communication, and the 5th house of creativity and luck. Like, I'm so pleased with your chart. I think that you're going to do great things. And I know, okay, on the serious note, we have this Neptune in Capricorn in the 4th house of family. And I know that from an early age, you were told, especially by siblings, and especially by those who you knew, you liked, you trusted, teachers as well, that you would not amount to anything. And let me tell you that it was only because they could not see your genius. You were a fish trying to climb a tree. Yeah, and they were all monkeys who climb trees for a living. Like, I'm specifically thinking of this image about testing in the scholastic system and how there are all these different animals lined up, like a bird, a snake, an elephant, a monkey, a fish, and the teacher is here saying your final exam is to climb a tree. Yeah, and that's, otherwise you fail. And it's like that image encapsulates your home life. Like, everybody was saying, oh, well, you're not going to amount to anything with all this Capricorn, Mars, Saturn nonsense that's happening in your chart. But really, like, you were being tested on the wrong thing just because they were creatively inept. Creatively inept. Yeah. And they had to sacrifice their dreams in order to appease other people. And they enforce that on you, darling. Does not mean that you need to follow suit. In fact, I would argue that it requires you to do the opposite. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on your chart. I appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing what comes of your work in the future. Okay, let's see, chart number 6, Kathy. Let's take a peek at Kathy's chart. So Kathy was born 5:19 a.m. in Detroit. Let's take a peek. So we have Scorpio rising, co-present with Pluto in Scorpio, Venus in Scorpio, being ruled by Mars in Pisces in the 5th. Also Jupiter in Pisces in the 5th. How do I feel about this? So it's tricky. It's tricky because from a medical perspective, you've loaded a lot of reproductive stuff in your chart, Kathy. I'm not necessarily a fan of all the reproductive stuff because Jupiter and Venus, although they tend to be benefic planets, from a medical astrology perspective, they are energies. Yeah, they are neutral. They're not good or bad. They just tend to bring effects to the body. Venus tends to bring swelling, and Jupiter tends to bring even more swelling. And you've put them both in water signs. You've also put Mars in Pisces, which tends to be an aggravated immune system. And to have Pluto, Venus, and the ascendant all in Scorpio, we immediately put the reproductive stuff. The fifth house is known to have reproductive and child influences. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's powerful, and it's very watery. But I would be suspicious of these body systems. I would be careful with any pregnancies that you have. I would really play it by the book. Jupiter and Pisces in the fifth, massive amounts of creativity and intuition, but from a physical standpoint, the fifth house is the house of children. Having Jupiter here means that the family is going to be big. Things are going to be prone to being enormous, yeah, in the fifth house. But also to have Mars here in a water sign, which he does not like to be in Pisces, I think that there is a tendency for the fifth house of children to be a little bit more inflammatory than even you would like. So that's just my caution. Yeah. Also, Venus in Scorpio in her fall does not like to be in Scorpio. Venus in Scorpio does give us, from a medical perspective, the tendency for the female reproductive areas to be swollen, to have things like PCOS. And we just want to make sure that Venus is expressed appropriately. The lymphatic system is always moving, and I think that you've done a good job with some of your other placements to counterbalance that, but this is the first kind of cool but also potentially not so cool part of your chart, where we see the water systems ganging up, giving some emotional turmoil, but also some physical issues in that first house of self and body, and fifth house of children and creativity. But in order to complement all of that water, to keep it in check and in balance, we have the moon in Leo up in the 10th, and we have a stellium of Saturn, Mercury, Uranus, and the sun all in Sagittarius in the second house of finance. So when it comes to your chart, Kathy, I think you've balanced the water and the fire interestingly. However, there is a square between this Mercury in Sag and Jupiter in Pisces. Yeah, there are layers. Your chart is tricky, Kathy, and I'm going to say it's tricky in this way. If you don't vent these energies appropriately, they have a tendency to go very wrong very quickly. They're powerful placements. Powerful placements. You've decided to really surge a lot of your water and really surge a lot of your fire. However, if the fire goes untended for a hot minute, and or if this water starts to coagulate, yeah, the body and the personality will tend to crumble very quickly. As an example, this is something that you've noticed. Sagittarius rules the hips, also the liver and the blood vessels. It's also a very physically active sign. Yeah? What you'll notice is that when you go to the gym, you tend to overdo it. Yeah? Gotta move, and then you end up hurting yourself, especially in the hip department. Yeah? But then also with the watery signs, if you unlock your heart, if you really allow your emotions to come to the surface, you can't turn them off. You tend to just smack over the fire hydrant and the water goes everywhere. It's that kind of stuff. So we need to learn how to channel these energies more appropriately. There's not enough earth in your chart to direct all of this fire and water. So we would need to remediate this a little bit energetically with some grounding herbs, some grounding practices, working energetically with things like gemstone medicine, but also food as a remediation. Our densest aspect ritually. Scheduling, that's one thing that Sagittarius and Pisces both absolutely hate, is to stick to a schedule. But I don't think that applies so much to you because we've got this North Node in Aries. Like you're learning, honey, how to stick to a schedule, and I respect that. Let's see what else. Mm. I'm in awe of how technically complicated. Like, I envision this chart as being as a very gymnast oriented chart. Like, the first time that you look at the rings, or the first time that you look at the horse, or the first time that you look at the trampoline and you see all these people doing these amazing feats, it's very, very difficult, and you find all of this technical complication, and you're like, how in the hell do they do all this? How do people manage their bodies, their time, their resources in this way? It really comes down to practice in your chart, Kathy. I think that rituals and routine, so important for you. If you don't have that to ground a lot of these fiery and watery placements, then they tend to go all over the place. You need a stone perimeter around that hearth. You need a vase to hold your water. Like, you need these earth elements, this element of practice, of routine, of ritual to come forward in your chart to mitigate and help and assist all of these fire trine squares and water trine squares that we have in the chart, to push you into that sixth house of work ethic. Yeah, so that's really what I would consider. And I think that you've chosen a lot of really cool friends to help you with that as well. Like, one of the things that your friends probably rib you on about a lot is the idea of showing up places on time. And we know that if you're on time, you're late. If you're early, you're on time. So that's something I would listen to the friends about, because they tend to be right. Like, they're pushing you in that direction of being a little bit more focused, a little bit more grounded, and not being swayed to some of these other more passionate energies in the chart. Because nobody's questioning your passion. Yeah, we're questioning how you manage your resources, and that's something that needs to be a little bit more fine-tuned with ritualistic practice. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. We've got 2 more charts to go through and about 15 minutes to do it, so we're back on time. Let's talk about Rebecca. So Rebecca was born 8:10 p.m. in Brooklyn. Let's take a peek at Rebecca's chart. Girl, these stelliums. So we have 4 planets in Scorpio in the 5th house. We have Pluto, Saturn, Sun, and Mercury, all in Scorpio in the 5th house. We also have Uranus, Jupiter, South Node, Neptune, all in the 6th house in Sagittarius. Where's the moon? The moon is over in the 7th in relationships. And here we have a healing journey that's present in the chart. Oh, supportive family dynamic. I love to see that. Love to see a good family story work out, because supportive resources are so important. Learning stuff. Yeah, I'm a fan. Let's take a peek and decode some of these placements, shall we? So you're very productive as a person, Rebecca. We've got this Jupiter and Sagittarius in the 6th house of work, health, pets. I think that, like, the ability for you to just walk into the work environment and just magically make things appear is really interesting. But the South Node is here. You've already learned how to do a hard day's work. Like, you don't need to learn that lesson anymore. However, one of the things that I think you are learning about this time around is health, and the healing journey and the healing process. You've got this North Node in the 12th house, opposing your Sagittarius placements by sign. And I think, Rebecca, one of the things in your chart that we need to be aware of is you're here to do deeper healing work in that 12th house of karmic healing, of hidden enemies, in jails and hospitals, on retreats, like in the dark corners and recesses of the soul. Yeah, where people often stick a lot of the things that they don't necessarily want to deal with. you've put your north node here. So this is kind of where the north of your personal compass is pointed. And we need to respect that. We need to honor that and create space for those healing journeys. And I think that, you've done really well with that, putting Jupiter and Sagittarius in the 6th house of health. But another area that I think needs to be respected is your children will often be a large contributing factor to your healing journey. Now, something that I'd like to point out, because we have Pluto and Saturn in the 5th house of children, it may be difficult to conceive. There may be issues with pregnancies as you first start out. However, having the moon in Capricorn in the 7th does give a very supportive partner, does give a partner who's able to rationalize the situation and help you feel a little bit more at ease and at peace with that situation. But you delving into the 5th house of children and creativity and honoring that power that you have, I think, is a big part of the chart. I think that children are one of the ways that you can unlock a lot of your healing potential, because there is so much. You've put the sun here, you've put the Mercury here, ruling your 12th house, North Node in Gemini. I think that the more you understand that hope comes from giving the next generation hope. Yeah, that's one of the big lessons in your chart that I can see coming forward really, really strong. And that the small work that you do, like the day-to-day tasks, are not as important as the big generational work that you do, kind of reclaiming and molding that next generation of tomorrow. And you've, like, Venus and Libra in the 4th house of family and home, like your home is your sanctuary. And it's, from an early perspective, like Venus and Libra, although, Libra does tend to be a little bit pushy and a little bit indecisive when things are unjust, which can make for a somewhat difficult upbringing. Venus in Libra is in her proper sign, in her proper place, in the 4th house of family and home. So there is good family influence here. Like, the bones are strong in that dynamic. And I think that you wanting to carry on that next generation is very much important for you. And I think that that's just a beautiful way that you can express the positive aspects of your chart. We do have the third house Mars and Virgo in that writing, teaching, communication space, in mutual reception with Mercury in the 5th. You'd be an excellent teacher, for sure, especially teaching children. I think it all comes back to this idea of understanding deeper healing and karmic processes, potentially surrounding not necessarily being able to be as child rearing as you would like in early days, but then coming to terms with the idea that you working with children can take many, many different forms, but you are supposed to be here kind of molding and shaping the next generation, teaching and writing and speaking to these people who are impressionable, because you have a message that is very motherly and very yet still very stern, that moon in Capricorn. And I think that you are uniquely qualified to tap that resource in your chart, whereas other people would not necessarily understand that space. Cool. Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate it. Okay, we've got one more chart to do and just a couple minutes to run through it. So let's take Sally. So Sally was born 10:32 p.m. in Pittsburgh. Let's take a peek at Sally's chart. Okay. So we've got the ascendant in Aquarius, ruled by Saturn and Virgo in the 8th. This is really interesting from a physical perspective. Anytime that Saturn rules the chart, we find a body that is a little bit more crippled, a little bit more feeble, especially in early years, but a body that tends to progress like a fine wine. It's something where strength is definitely later in life, not earlier in life, which makes it difficult growing up, but a lot funner when they're an adult, as they sort of come into their own and start to create a lot more power and wealth and understanding. The Sun in Cancer in the 6th with Uranus in Cancer in the 6th. Not necessarily a fan of that placement. Like the idea of you playing the mother hen in the work dynamic, Sally, has always kind of followed you around ever since you were young. Like people just come to you for that mothering, that nurturing, that Cancerian kind of archetype that comes forward in your chart. Uranus being here in the sixth house of work, though, does mean unpredictability. It does mean that there tend to be kind of cataclysmic happenings in the workspace for you, as well as in the health space, because the Cancer is the sign of the stomach. We do have Uranus here in the sign of the stomach in the sixth house of health, being random and spontaneous stomach issues. The North Node being in the third house of writing, teaching, communication, ruled by Mars in Gemini, co-present with Mercury in Gemini. I think that really does, it's the same formation that we saw in the last chart, just with different planets. The third and the fifth house being connected, especially in this chart, even more so, because we have Mercury in his home sign of Gemini, ruling the Mars that is ruling the North Node in the third house of writing, teaching, communication. I think that like you're here to speak, you're here to teach, you're here to write, to share your journey, to make strong impact, to really understand that there is a lot that you have to say, a lot that you do have to contribute. Unfortunately, there's this wishy-washy tendency with this Neptune and Libra up in the ninth, where what should I study? What should I learn? There are so many things that I'm interested in, and I never really master any of them. It's that jack of all trades, master of none type quality. But whatever you do choose, this Moon in Virgo and Saturn in Virgo really kick in, and you get so precise, so detailed, so nuanced. And I like that compliment. I really do. I think that there's a good balance there for sure. But again, we need to go back to that third house of writing, teaching, communication. So once you master something, as a Moon in Virgo tends to do with that Saturn ruling the chart, once you achieve that mastery, it's then time to not get bored and throw it away, but to deepen your relationship with it through teaching. Yeah, that's one of the things that Saturn gets super bored with, is if they're not actively telling people their opinions. They just get very disinterested, because Saturn has this thing, especially Saturn in Virgo, they're always right. And they always have something to talk about, complain about, and or share. Yeah. And that's just something that we see a lot with this sign combination, and it's not a bad thing. It can be very, very helpful. We just need to recognize that not everybody wants your opinion, but if you stack your life in a way that you're able to show up to events and venues where your opinion is actively sought out, yeah, then this Saturn in Virgo gets so happy, because it's like, yes, I have a lot to say, and I know what I'm talking about, and I would like to share it with you. Thank you for asking. But if the Saturn is not exercised appropriately, then it comes out with like just drilling people a new one in terms of your thoughts, your opinions, your experiences, and that's not something that can be productive to relationships in general. So vent that through finding, teaching, speaking, writing opportunities, so that your voice is heard without you feeling the need to oppress other people with your opinions. We have a connection between Venus in Leo and the Sun in Cancer in the 7th and 6th, respectively. Marrying halfway through the life, because Pluto is also in Leo in the 7th house of relationships. But Venus in Leo, I think, Sally is attracted to somebody who really speaks their mind, somebody who's able to embody the qualities that unfortunately she can't, but she's learning to embody. Somebody who's unapologetic and flamboyant about their thoughts, their opinions, their experiences, and often somebody who has had to work at being so expressive because of that Pluto archetype. And I think that that's the perfect blend for Sally to really sink her teeth into, because with that Saturn ruling the chart, the early years were all about suppression and developing hardness and understanding, the idea of holding back. And now she's being taught, hey, it's not only okay to open up, it is important to open up, and it is needed. And it is, if you don't open up, if you don't initiate, if you don't talk and share and speak, then unfortunately you won't be living your life's purpose. And that's definitely the crux of the chart. Excellent. Okay. Perfect. And we are almost at an hour. thank you everybody for jumping on for the live stream. Again, if you would like to be a part of the live stream, or if you have friends or family that would like to donate their charts to science, please feel free to private message me their birth dates, places, and times. Always with consent. Do not send me a chart just because you want to know about your frickin' boyfriend, or you want to know about this family member that you've got beef with. Like, only consenting charts, please. But yes, have them send in their info, and I will message you when you're up in the queue. If you would like to support the live stream, you can always send me PayPal, sam at ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. Venmo is Sam-Bellier, which is my first and last name. And then if you would like to learn astrology or schedule a consult with me, just go to ScorpioRisingAstrology.com and check out the website. You'll be able to see my online classes, my consult offerings, and we can talk about this further. But stay tuned. We'll do this again on Wednesday at 10:30, and I'll message you if your chart is being featured that day. Until next time, may the stars be ever in your favor. Mwah.